Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of There's Danger Here. I'm Leilani,
And I'm Sam.
and today we are going to talk about a case that starts in 1940.
Okay. It's good time.
Apparently, I love this era because
I mean,
we're staying here for a while.
it was a unique time
Yeah,
in at least actually world history,
yeah,
not
yeah.
just American history, world history.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, Clifford Olson Jr. was born on January 1st, 1940, to parents Clifford and Leona in St. Paul, returning to their home in Vancouver, Canada the next day. The eldest of four, his mother was a stay-at-home mom, his father a milkman. But the pay was meager, and his mom worked hard to stretch meals and mend clothing while his father worked extra jobs to make ends meet. Eventually, Clifford found work as a laborer and local builder, earning enough that the family got to move or live more comfortably for a while. When World War II broke out, Clifford Sr. signed up for the military. He left to fight, and upon his return was a changed man. A quiet man who held his family close. As the war came to an end, Canada began a housing program, which allowed the Olson family to relocate into a new home in Richmond, and it sounds like they were building almost entire communities at this time of new houses
Hmm.
and housing their veterans in it.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
hmm By the time they moved into the new neighborhood, Clifford Jr. was 5. He started school in the new city, but he was the new kid and didn't take kindly to being an outsider in many ways. Within a week, he was in a school fight. He lost, but it set the tone for years to come. Clifford Jr. was a punching bag rather than a fighter.
Oh,
Most of it sounds like he kind of instigated and would throw the first punch and then just lose.
oh. Well,
Oh no, it's tough.
it is tough.
Meanwhile, his younger siblings excelled in school.
Oh, that's even more tough.
Clifford Sr. moved from construction to property management and maintenance, adding to his resume becoming a super for several apartment buildings and homes. The result was increased free time, which he decided to spend with his children and helping around the house. So he sounds like a great
He
dad.
does sound like a good dad.
Yeah. All of the children flourished at this time, all of them except for Clifford Jr. He didn't take to his father's attention until his father smuggled him into a boxing match.
Oh, fun.
Senior saw how much his son was taken by it, and so he took Clifford Jr. to a gym, booking him for boxing lessons. After
That's I'm just touched actually by that.
Mhm.
It feels like a really good dad that
It was.
notices like my son isn't something's off. Like
Yeah.
something feels wrong with my son and
Well, we're not connecting,
yeah,
and
like
so
what
he
can I
tries.
do? And he thinks, "Oh, we need to be naughty. We need to like
Mhm.
break a few rules and make it feel
Mhm.
like we're doing something that mom and the rest of the world doesn't want us to do." And it would definitely win your kid over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Um, so after proper training, turns out he was pretty good, and so he was entered into competitions, and he flourished, and there was talk of him becoming a real contender over the next few years, kind of when he hit his prime. But Clifford Jr. didn't care much about being a contender, as he did taking down every single person he fought with before he learned how to
Oh.
box.
Oh, yeah. It would be, like, pretty frustrating, actually.
hmm For that, he was feared in school. But slowly his social circle grew, and as it did, his care for training waned. He filled his social circle with pimps, con artists, and other degenerates. But among them, he felt comfortable, and so he found his voice. Literally, he found the gift for gab. In 1956, by the time he was 16, Clifford Jr. dropped out of Canby Junior High School. His parents allowed this so long as he got a job. He ended up getting one at the old Lansdowne racetrack, taking bets from patrons, and soon enough he realized he could drop fake hints for financial gain. So again, he used the way that he talked for
Wow.
money.
I mean, that's pretty clever.
Mhm. But still, he was not happy with his meager pittance that he brought in, and he went with his friends who put him to work immediately. They started him as a hired muscle, and then he took to mugging people, and then burglary.
He's lived like a full life and he's not even 18.
You know.
Like he's been a boxer, he's
Yeah.
worked at the tracks. Like he's like an old man and he's 18 years old.
Yeah. Though he became good at this too, burglarizing the wealthiest, so often police started keeping eye on the wealthy neighborhoods and eventually catching Clifford Jr. as he was climbing into a window.
Hmm.
In 1957, he was arrested for it, and the judge sent him to New Haven Borstal Correctional Center in Burnaby, where he would stay until his 18th birthday, which was a mere 9 months after his sentencing.
Not that long.
Mm-mm. Clifford found himself at the top of the pecking order in a facility where he could fight the best compared to everybody else that
Oh,
was
for
there.
sure. For sure. And it's for youth, I would imagine then. So he's also basically going to be one of the oldest people in there.
Yeah. He found that he was offered the most feminine looking boys as a result.
Oh,
I know. It's that time.
yep. Here we go.
Yeah. Still, Clifford couldn't stand being locked up, and so he escaped weeks before his 18th birthday.
Man, so many escape artists in the world, I feel
Mhm.
like.
By the way of going over the wall with the aid of nearby trees. So it sounds like the trees were overgrown and hanging down into the walls, and so
So
he
he
just
could just
jumped.
climb and
Yep.
grab it.
hmm
Oh,
Taking off to the waterfront of Richmond and stealing a speedboat before anyone knew he was gone. The police quickly caught up with him because it sounds like he had no idea how to work said speedboat,
uh,
so he was not moving very quickly.
oh no. I was thinking, like, what a badass way to escape. Jump
He
on a
didn't.
speedboat. I'm like seeing him with his like aviator glasses on. I
Yeah,
know he doesn't, but
yeah. No,
glorifying it.
he was hardly moving.
Oh,
So he was
he was
arrested and brought back to jail,
even funnier.
and the court decided that for his escape attempt, 2 years was handed down.
Wow.
In addition, he was transferred to an adult prison.
Oh, okay. Get ready, buddy.
Yeah, where he would complete hard labor. He was sent to Haney Correctional Facility, and while his knowledge of fighting kept him from being attacked, he was also seen as a nuisance and never really fell in with the crowd. So they basically were like, "You're a child, and we don't want to talk to you."
Right.
The isolation led to him becoming an informant for his part.
Hmm.
He realized the guards treated him better until the end of his time there. His family took him in for a while, but soon Clifford Jr. was ready to get away, and so he moved to a flop house in New Westminster. Due to his previous sentencing, he was required to report any changes of address, and he did. This had him picked up by police weeks later, and his address change coincided with a series of break-ins.
Hmm.
So they're
That,
like, "Huh, weird, you moved, and then all of a sudden we're having these B&Es, and you were originally sentenced for a B&E."
it sounds a little unfair, though, you know? Like,
I'm sure they had evidence with
I
them too.
wish, I
They
mean,
weren't just like, "Oh, you came here at the same time, so you're going to jail." Like,
it is also pretty damning, but
yes. hmm
it'd be a shame if he didn't actually commit those.
He was jailed when pawn shop owners were able to identify both
Hmm.
the stolen items and Clifford.
Okay, so my benefit of the doubt did not pay off there.
This time he was sentenced to almost 10 years
Wow.
to be served at the British Columbia Penitentiary. There he was celled in with rapist Gary Marcoux. The two became friends, and Gary taught him the ropes of prison. Eventually, Gary started talking about his crimes, though, and one in particular was the rape and murder of a child. And immediately, Clifford tried to use this as a way to take time off his sentence because they hadn't been able to prove that he
Uh,
was attached to this crime. So he was becoming,
like, he was a snitch.
oh, yeah, he's been that.
Yeah, I know.
Yep, he sure was. One night, so there was a burden of proof, and so Clifford thought about other ways to get more concrete evidence. So one night, after some jailhouse wine was procured, the two got to talking. Eventually, Clifford convinced Gary to write down what he did. By morning, Clifford was gone, and Gary was mad. For this, Clifford's sentence was reduced, and he only had 2.5 years left. But upon his return to prison, word spread of his assistance, and he was isolated by other prisoners. As he wasn't in any of the inner dealings anymore, the guards no longer received information, and so he lost favor with them as well, and he became sort of a pariah in prison.
Mm.
Luckily, chaos erupted and a riot occurred. Clifford hid in a closet until guards passed by, and then he slipped out of prison.
Oh my
By the
God.
time his absence was noted, Clifford had put a considerable amount of distance between himself and the prison. He slept under the Queensborough Bridge in New Westminster for the first night. Then, when the sun rose, he took about stealing clothing, items, and other things that he would need to be able to stay in hiding. But he was undone by a dog,
Oh,
Rinty,
Rinty?
who
Oh,
was
that's
brought
cute.
out in order to aid in the capture of Clifford. Clifford had managed to stay in hiding until Rinty caught onto his scent, and he was found and captured. He
Oh,
was returned to the penitentiary and given an additional year for his escape.
just a year?
hmm Clifford then attempted to slit his wrist, but only to get out of prison. And the ploy, it did end up working, sort of. He went to the local hospital. So I guess he like slit his wrist and then sat down. And in the morning, the guards come by and he's like, hey, come look at this.
Oh,
So he's still, I mean, very much with it. And
right.
they see all the blood and they're like, all right.
Yeah.
So hospital we go. Once in the hospital, he waited until he was alone and changed into another patient's clothes, then simply walked out.
Oh my gosh. They make it sound so easy. I mean, it probably was easier then
Than
than
it
it
is
is
now.
now, but
I know, because I think about it now and I'm like, there's always at least one officer in the room, depending on what level you are. Sometimes there are two. Like,
yeah,
usually either shackled or you have leg chains on. And I know it's a different time. So I'm like, that's insane that they weren't shackled. Like,
it is
no belt
insane.
chains, no nothing. Okay.
I know. I was thinking like the other day I had to wheel an inmate out and they like forced him to get back into his uniform
hmm
before he left his room.
hmm
Um, and I was just thinking about that. Like, why are they like, because he really didn't want to. And I
hmm
was like, why are they so serious about it right this minute? And then I thought, well, he could get up and walk in his wheelchair and no one would know.
Yeah.
Like,
If he took off running, it'd be
yeah,
harder to identify him
yeah.
with that on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on, girl. You knew this.
I know, I didn't know that, but
This time he went south, but continued to break into people's houses for essentials, allowing police to track the break ins and determine what location or
good
what direction
God.
he was going. Aware that he was likely heading for the U.S. border, Clifford made it to the,
You stay in Canada, Clifford.
Clifford made it to the provincial park. There, he found two teenagers out for a walk in the park and he pulled a pistol he had stolen and waved it at them, telling them not to tell police what they had seen. While they may not have thought anything about him before, his actions were like immediately caused them to go to police. Like they were just teenagers walking. They probably had no idea about this prison breakout. They probably wouldn't have even thought
Oh
to
my
look at him. And he's like,
God.
don't tell anybody you saw me. So immediately they go to police and tell them what they saw
They
him.
saw him 100%. Like,
As
oh, it's so silly.
as the police swarmed, Clifford hid in the woods under a layer of fallen leaves. This time it was American police hunting him because he had made it just over the border.
No, no.
They brought with them, Tiger,
The dog.
another police
I know.
dog.
I was just thinking, did he not learn his lesson? Like,
Tiger immediately ran up to the pile of leaves
of
and
course.
started barking. He was arrested and brought to Blaine, Washington before being extradited back to Canada.
Oh my
These
God.
dogs do him in every time.
Tiger.
hmm
Rinty and Tiger.
This time, an administrative error led to him being released early,
Wow.
but he couldn't stop his antics, racking up charges of assault, armed robbery, breaking and entering, forging, and drinking and driving. And back to the penitentiary he went.
There you go. Don't let him out. Don't let him escape. Don't let him out. Like,
Yes. In the penitentiary, he was an informant once again, but times had changed and much of the penitentiary was shut down as it was in ill repair. The other inmates were easily able to identify who the snitch was
mhm.
once like things started getting leaked out. Still, for his efforts, again he was given early parole just after serving a year of his sentence.
Oh my, only a year.
Mhm. Once again, he was unable to keep his nose clean and quickly found his way back to jail.
Yeah.
Then on to Prince Albert Penitentiary in Saskatchewan. He did as he always did, took notes on the gangs, their movements, and drugs coming in. When he had enough information, he went to the warden, and as promised, a reduction in sentence occurred. He watched as the cells were torn apart and drugs were found, but what he didn't know is that in this prison, it was the corrupt guards who were the ones bringing it in,
Oh,
and so they gave up the name of the rat. Clifford found out the inmates knew when he was stabbed 7 times with feces-laden blades.
ew.
So while the cuts weren't immediately life-threatening, the infection to follow was.
Whoa.
Mhm.
That is dirty. Like, a
Literally.
literal level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whoa.
He spent months in the hospital recuperating. It sounds like in the beginning he was fighting fevers and hallucinations and, of course, infections. What
Mm-hmm.
infections do? Like, he sounds like he was septic much of the
Oh,
time.
for sure.
So he ended up spending so much time there. By the time he was healthy, it was time to parole on September 7th, 1980, and he was released from prison.
Wow. You know, you at one point said that he was sentenced to 10 years for like a B&E, I think.
Hmm.
And my brain went to, wow, Canada's tough on their criminals. Like, that's a long time. That's a big sentence. Like, and now I'm like, what the fuck are you doing, Canada?
We do it too
I
on
know.
this
I
side.
know, but I just was hoping that they maybe did it better.
Yeah.
Like, they don't.
No, we all suck.
Oh my God.
It's always these kind of criminals that somehow find a way
I
out. And you're
know.
like, why is it you?
Yeah. How come there was a paperwork error for you, but there isn't for someone who's clearly innocent? Like,
Yeah.
what is going on here? What's happening?
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at you. All I can think of at this point is my man did a bump of coke and is doing 3.5 years.
Exactly. For real. 3.5 years. And here this guy is like
Oh,
literally waving guns at teenagers' faces and stealing people's cars and he's
he's
get
out.
to spend the day in the hospital or a few months in the hospital and then
Get
go
out.
get out of here.
It's ridiculous.
It's crazy.
Oh, yep. Back out in the world again. I don't know if you're surprised to hear this, but he continued the
Oh,
same shit.
you can tell me whatever you want at this point.
This circled him back to another stint in Prince Albert Penitentiary, and this time he meant not to stay. So he broke out of prison within weeks of his arrival. He traveled to the outer municipalities of Richmond, Surrey, renting an apartment at the New Surrey Village Apartments in August of 1980. He was 40 by this time.
Oh my
He's been
gosh.
in and out of prison since he was a baby. 17.
What's interesting is like I feel like he lived more life from the time he was 16 to 18 than he has now.
Yep.
Like now he's just like on a loop, like
Mhm.
nothing more.
Mhm. So this time he found work on construction sites as well as working odd jobs like fixing plumbing and heating. He even put cards up and around the community. One such place was the People's Gospel Church in Surrey. And when he did, he met Joanne Howe. While she was slightly older, Clifford laid on his charm and they began talking. Joan was recently divorced from an abusive alcoholic, and within months they were living together. Although he kept up his payments on the apartment and would go there at times. While Joan showed him a gentle side, Clifford wanted the roughness and the um and one night out he met a prostitute at a bar. He was physically rough with her, leaving her bruised and bloodied, and she reported him and he went to jail, but the charges were dropped due to her profession.
What?
Clifford realized he missed Joan while he was away and meant to tie her down. And as luck would have it for him, Joan was pregnant.
Oh no.
Cliff- Clifford went out the night that he found out that she was pregnant to celebrate, drinking and taking pills.
Because that's how you celebrate a pregnancy.
Exactly. And that night, November 17th, 1980, he met Christine Weller, a 12-year-old.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, you're about to celebrate the fact that you're going to be a father, which you celebrate the most ridiculous way possible. And then you now are who knows what's going to happen to this 12-year-old.
Let me tell you, because it's not great. She was riding her bike after the mall had closed, and he brought out a knife and pressed it to her neck, leaving 2 superficial cuts. The two traveled to Fraser Dykes in Richmond. Then he attacked her, stabbing her as he held his hand around her throat. Autopsy would show the knife penetrated her heart twice and her liver 4 times. All in all, she was stabbed 10 times.
Why?
She was found Christmas morning by a person walking their dog.
Oh,
The dog found her.
oh, Christmas morning. Oh, it's so sad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Also, why?
For the thrill of it. We'll talk about it in a little bit.
Ugh.
Joan and Clifford set their date to marry for May of 1981, but before they got married, Clifford wanted to go on his own for what he called a bachelor road trip.
Oh, gross.
I know. He went to his old stomping grounds and found that the old British Columbia Penitentiary had been decommissioned and was open to the public as a museum. And he could not help himself.
Oh,
Clifford went for a tour.
I can't blame him there.
Unbeknownst to him, one of the old guards was now a tour guide.
Oh my God.
He recognized Clifford and knew he had escaped, so he made a phone call. By the time Clifford walked out of the penitentiary, he was cuffed up by police.
No. Oh,
Because he wanted to see.
I forgot that he had escaped the last time, and I was sort of like, yeah, I would go back there and walk around too if I, was a free man. I forgot he left there, like just on his own accord.
Yeah.
And now he's walking back to go view the museum.
Mm-hmm. So he was sent to Matsky Institution in Abbotsford with an additional month added to his sentence. There he did his time getting out just in time for his wedding, never telling Joan where he was, instead
What?
let her believe it was part of his bachelor road trip.
They only booked him for that long?
Yeah, once.
That's crazy. That's crazy. It seems like such a waste of money to even arrest him at that point.
Upon his release, he was on mandatory supervision.
Oh, uh-huh.
Please remember that he was on mandatory supervision when we get talking about what
Oh,
happens next.
okay.
Upon his return, he went back to pretending to be a pillar within the community Joan lived in. But on the other side, he was much worse. On April 16, 1981, Clifford offered 13-year-old Colleen Dagno a job at his work site. She agreed and in the morning sat next to him in his truck as they drove off. He offered her schnapps on the way, and she drank it.
Mm.
Unfortunately, the schnapps was laced with roofies, and after passing out, he drove them to an abandoned lot and drug her out of the car. After raping her, he beat her to death with a hammer, and he hit her hard enough it exposed brain matter.
Oh, what a loser.
Once she was dead, he wrapped her in a tarp and put her in the bed of the truck. From there, he drove out to the woods and dumped her body where he thought she wouldn't be found. Her body was discovered 5 months later.
By a dog.
This one doesn't say.
Sorry, that's
Probably.
it's not funny.
It's not funny, but dogs are prevalent here.
Oh yeah, what a loser.
Mm-hmm.
You have to roofie a 13-year-old? Okay.
It doesn't get better.
You're so, like,
We're about to
be a better killer, bro. Like, that's so stupid. It's so, like, embarrassing.
It's about to get worse.
Oh, God.
Okay.
Okay.
On April 22nd, he met 16-year-old Darren Johnsrud in Westminster. Darren was new in town, and Clifford offered him work, talking to him as they sat on a bench drinking beer. Again, Clifford roofied him and brought him into his truck. When he was unconscious, Clifford drove to Darush. Again, he had an abandoned area picked out, pulling Darren out of the truck and raping him as well. Then he tortured him, breaking his legs and arms before crushing his head with a hammer. He too was taken out of the woods, but was discovered by a pair of hikers less than 2 weeks later.
Mm.
So as he escalates, he talks about, because I know you want to know why he's acting like this. So he finds a fascination in death and killing these people. Like at one point, he talks about beating the girl with the hammer and how when he'd hit her in the head, it would move a body part even after she was dead.
God.
And so he felt like he was a mad scientist and he loved trying to inflict new torture to see what would happen to bodies as they died, is what he said. That's according to him. And so his torture gets worse.
God. I mean, you can't call yourself a scientist if you're not writing stuff down, first of all. Like, he's disgusting.
That's where you're going with
I
this?
mean, no, where I was gonna go with this was the boy. Did you say it's the same community?
S- So he met him in Westminster, but he had just come in from a different town, so he was an out of towner.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
I'm just thinking, like,
How beautiful town.
yeah, and
Hmm.
like
Two
two
kids.
kid bodies are like popping up. I mean, I know the first one was 5 months down the line, but like two kids go missing and just like happen to be potentially about to work at this guy's
Hmm.
business.
Well, they don't know that.
I guess they don't know that part, right?
Hmm. They don't. So the two said, I do, on May 15th,
Oh no.
1981. On May 19th, Clifford was cruising around in his car when he came upon a hitchhiker. 16-year-old Sandra Wolfsteiner was trying to get home after fighting with her boyfriend. So it sounds like rather than, get in a car with him, she's like just going to walk home. And so Clifford offered her a ride. And when she got in, he also offered her a drink and she accepted because she's pissed off. And
Mm-hmm.
she too got roofied. He drove to Chilliwack Lake, took her out of the truck and raped her. Then he took out his hammer, a 5-inch spike, and drove them into her head repeatedly.
What?
Because again, he wanted to see how the body would react to this spike.
Oh, that's just so disgusting.
It is.
So
Yeah.
disgusting.
Then he buried her in a shallow grave. Back in his home life, Clifford and Joan sold Joan's house and moved to an apartment in Coquitlam, where he found work as a super. But it was an adult-only apartment complex, so the couple quickly had to move to another apartment down the road just in time for Clifford's first child, a son, Stephen, to be born. He attended church with his family every Sunday. He doted on and spoiled his child, but also would bring toys to the other children in the apartment complex they lived in.
Mm.
When a girl within the complex went missing, he drove around all hours to help search for her.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. He knows exactly where she's at.
Hmm. On June 21st, Clifford was out on the roads again. 13-year-old Ada Court was headed home after babysitting. He pulled up and the two chatted as she walked. After a while, he offered her a job, as long as she did well in a quick interview, and so she hopped in the truck and they talked. He offered her a drink and she accepted it, then drove out to Weaver Lake where he tortured her. He poked her with a needle and put air in her veins, beat her, strangled her, and stabbed her. I I hear this about the air in the veins, and it always on the medical side, I'm like, really?
I know.
But I know that movies portray like you put in a little
I
bit
know.
and it like how much air you have to put in for that
I
to
know.
actually work?
I always like laugh at not to go on a side tangent, but like when people are priming their IVs or like the machine beeps and there's like a tiny little bubble in there and they're like spend so much time like removing that one little bubble. I'm always like, oh my God, you would need to
It
do
would have
like
to be the whole line
the
almost.
entire line of oxygen before it actually caused any bit of like disruption
And even then
in
it's
your
only potential. The
right
body could still theoretically
absorb.
absorb it as
Yeah,
it came in. It would have had to because it would have to be much faster than the line would have pushed it in. I
yeah,
know. I see it all the time. I'm like, guys, calm down.
I
Or
know,
the family's like, there's an air bubble in there. Is that gonna be okay? And every time I'm like, I would have to put more air in this line for it to actually affect a patient. I was like, I know the movies say
I know,
that it's this tiny little bit and something's gonna happen. I'm like, but the body just absorbs. It's fine, I promise
I
you.
know. I watched a show the other day where someone claimed that it was like a spy show. It's actually quite good, but obviously this is ridiculous. They said that someone had put a needle in their toe and injected air.
Their toe,
Like
not even in a vein, just in
no,
the
it was
toe.
like in between the toes. Well, so it probably was like in a vein, but I mean they're capillary. Like you're not gonna get it in a good vein on like in between your toes. But
No,
that's how they supposedly killed this person. I was just like, wow, okay,
that's
this is ridiculous.
that is ridiculous.
Yeah,
I can't watch most shows like that after working in a
I
medical
know
field
it's
for so
tough.
long. I'm like, stop it.
It is tough,
Oh,
but
okay.
um, to get back to this awful man,
Yeah, I was gonna say back to the terribleness of
yeah,
this.
we needed a little like reprieve for a second there. Like,
Yes. So when she was dead and he was done, he placed her too in a shallow grave, covered her, and left. She was, however, found 2 months later. But Clifford was getting comfortable with victimizing children. He went after a 16-year-old that managed to get away from him, going straight to police, and for it, Clifford was brought to jail, but managed to talk his way out of charges, as if it had been a misunderstanding.
What?
hmm And because they're underage, they're not named. So
He must have, really became a pillar in this community.
he's on mandatory supervision, and that was just a
Oh
misunderstanding.
my God.
You already
You
forgot.
did say remember that, and I forgot. How? How does this man not instantly just, be brought back into prison right then?
I have no idea. Like, how does he charm his way out that it's a misunderstanding?
Did they not know that he was on this mandatory supervision,
They
maybe?
should. It's not hidden. Like, when you put his name in the system, it should pop up. Did they bother putting his name in the system?
Probably not.
So, it let his reign of terror continue.
That poor girl, too.
hmm Lucky girl, she got away.
I know, but, no one believed her.
I know.
She doesn't know what could have happened to her,
Mhm.
so now she just lives in the reality of, no one believes me.
There is another, I didn't really add it into this, but there was another little girl, like a 6-year-old or something like that, who he had been like kind of charming. And eventually she went to her parents and was like put off by him about something. And so was kind of telling the parents everything that, because
Mhm.
I think he like tried to touch her, tried to do
Right.
something inappropriate. And she was like, I know enough about stranger danger for this.
Right.
And so went to her parents, and he made it seem like she was talking out of order of events and, getting confused. And so that was dismissed as well. So that's the 16-year-old is technically the second time that he's brought up by police for being inappropriate with a
Wow.
younger person, and he still gets away.
That's crazy. One time is maybe, you can maybe understand, not the mandatory supervision part, but, you can maybe understand being like, okay, a misunderstanding, and he could be he's a smooth talker, as we know. But you would then have that person on your radar. At least,
You would hope.
yeah.
hmm Well, he has enough room to continue. So on July 2nd, 1981, he was back at it. He found 9-year-old Simon Partington riding his bicycle to a friend's. He talked with the boy and offered him a drink, and Simon thought he was a big boy, so he took a drink as they
No.
traveled to Richmond. Clifford pushed down on the boy's chest to keep him quiet, and then he too was raped and strangled, and Clifford buried the boy by Riverside. But
Uh,
this 9-year-old pushed the media. They started digging into what the police had not, and they connected the dots that there was likely a serial killer of children in their midst, pushing the police into action.
oh, that is so scary.
It's sad.
It's so sad and it's so scary. I don't know. It's just obviously so different when it's kids. It shouldn't be. Any serial killer we discuss should be very similar, in the gut reaction, but kids are just so helpless.
hmm
They just need protectors and
This is why in prison, uh, child killers, rapists, and guys that only go after women aren't really. I mean, it's more children, but even guys who only go after women, I think we've talked about that before. I always
yeah,
thought serial killers would be like high and mighty up on the food chain, and they're really not,
right,
because most of the guys say, well, who did they kill? Easy prey.
right.
That wasn't even a challenge, so that means that they're probably weak too. I'm like, dang, okay.
Yeah. I mean, 100% this guy is so
hmm
weak. It's
hmm
just sad. It's he's roofing 9-year-olds.
hmm Yeah.
What?
Yeah. To keep them subdued. A
Give them
9-year-old.
give them extra apple juice and they would pass out in a coma. You
Yeah.
don't need to roofie a 9-year-old. That's crazy.
Mhm. On July 7th, Clifford is actually charged with the sexual assault of a teenage girl who got away, but the police didn't link it to any of the recent killings of children. This simply made Clifford upset, and he was out again on July 9th. So he was charged, but he's not sentenced or anything yet. So he's out. July 9th, 2 days later, finding a 14-year-old Judy Kozma She was picked up in New Westminster as she walked home from school. Again, using the ruse of a job in his construction company, Clifford offered her a drink, to which she took just a sip. And again, he took her to Weaver Lake, and when he stopped, she took off, but she still had some drugs in her system, so she was pretty slow and kind of clumsy, and he
Mm-hmm.
caught her and brought her back to the truck, using a knife to scare her into silence. He then pulled out a tape recorder, hitting record as he drug her towards the lake. He then beat and tortured her. He stabbed her until she was dead. Then again, he buried her. And this time, a friend of Clifford's was accidentally a witness. He believed he saw Judy getting into the truck the day she went missing and dutifully told police. Clifford found the number of Judy's parents and did the unthinkable. He called them, and he told them about Judy's final moments, playing the recording of her
What?
screaming. Luckily and unluckily, luckily he had reached their landlord instead of the parents themselves, and the landlord was the one who had to listen to all these tapes and didn't hang up, and then relayed everything that they were told to police. Then they ended up tapping the line, but Clifford decided not to call them again.
Whoa.
Hmm.
That's like just a layer of demonicness
Hmm.
that I was not prepared for with him. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously he's a child, he's kills kids, but that's just something else.
Yeah. And he also says of this time that he would play the recording and he'd still get like sexually satisfied in it, but the more he played it, the less it
Did it?
it did it for him.
Yeah.
Like it felt dull because he's like, oh, I've heard this before.
Oh God.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh my God. It's like a horror movie.
Hmm. But it sounds like from then on, he usually started recording
Of
things.
course he did, because he enjoyed it.
Hmm. On July 23rd, Clifford continued. He next came across 15-year-old Raymond King Jr. Raymond was out looking for a job, and Clifford easily offered him one, showing him that he had a business card. So Raymond was big for a 15-year-old, though, so even after taking a celebration like a drink, he wasn't knocked out. When they got to Weaver Lake, once again, Raymond got out to run, and Clifford got up and threw him like off the road. So it sounds like he caught up to him and not quite tackled, but like pushed him,
Mm-hmm.
and he went down the embankment. Raymond tumbled all the way down, being cut and injured as he settled at the bottom. It sounds like he broke probably a leg or something because he wasn't able to get back
Mm-hmm.
up. Clifford slid down behind him, picking up a rock and bringing it down on Raymond's head multiple times until Raymond was dead. Clifford then dumped his body in a remote camping area, but he didn't get his release, and so the very next day he was back out. On July 25th, he found 14-year-old Sigrid Arndt, and she was an international student from Germany who literally had just landed in Canada
Oh,
that day. He offered her a ride and showed her around, and when he offered her a drink, she took it. This time, he did get to rape and beat her and
record the whole thing.
record it and use a hammer. When he was finished, he threw her into a water-filled ditch by the river in Richmond.
Oh, I mean, all of their poor parents, but I can't even imagine being like the parents of this international student who you just are
Sent away. Yeah.
so excited for them and obviously so nervous, but you're like, this is going to be amazing for
They're going to have
you.
great
Like,
life
yeah, this is
experiences.
so good for you. And then not even a day.
And it's Canada.
I know. I was going to say, I keep having to remind myself this isn't America.
Hmm. Since Clifford had a pending sexual assault crime, the police brought him in for questioning. He had been an informant in the past, and they thought he might be useful. But Clifford thought himself smarter than police, asking what information would be valuable, that he would be able to find the perpetrator and even some of the bodies for cash. This landed him in the crosshairs.
Yuck.
Only the killer or accomplice could make such a bold statement about knowing where these bodies are. So they did. They played along, saying that they would have to find out how much local prosecutors would pay for the bodies and cut him loose while they figured it out. Thinking he was a low-level ex-con, police only tracked him intermittently throughout the day.
Oh,
Clifford was unaware he was and continued about his life and prowling, and on July 27th, 3 days after killing Sigrun, he drove to the place he picked up Christine, where he saw a 15-year-old Terry Lynn Carson. He waited until she was away from her home and was at a bus stop down the road. He stopped his truck and offered her a ride. She got in and he gave her the usual drink and then drove her to Chilliwack. He raped her and then waited this time until she started to wake up before he choked her to death and dumped her along the Fraser River. Again, 3 days later on July 30th, he was out once again on the
Oh
prowl.
my God. Oh, his wife also.
hmm He found 17-year-old Louise Chartrand. She was walking to work when he pulled up and offered her a ride the rest of the way. She did get in, but she declined his drink since she was headed to work. And Louise attempted to get out of the still moving vehicle as she realized they weren't headed towards her work. But Clifford hit her with a hammer, knocking her out immediately. He then took her up to Whistler Mountain, where he raped and killed her and buried her in a shallow grave. Police were almost ready to cease their intermittent tailing of Clifford because when they were tailing him, they never saw anything.
Such bad luck.
I mean, they did see him commit petty crimes, as well as drinking, taking pills, and driving, but they were no closer to their killer. So they thought. Luckily, just before they stopped tailing him, they decided, they'd go out again, and they caught him on the prowl on August 12th.
Ugh.
He pulled over next to a pair of teenage hitchhikers, talking to them for a while, and the officers were in an unmarked car and were unsure how to handle this.
Yeah, I was just thinking, what do you do?
Because they didn't
You,
want to burn their tail, but
right,
they're watching.
right.
And
You
they're like,
have to watch. You have to
mhm,
prove, too, that something that is
mhm,
actually like nefarious happening
yeah.
here.
And again, they thought he was low level. So then he starts talking to these girls, and they're like, there's no way. There's no way we're tailing the actual killer.
Right.
But then the two girls got into the truck, and the police decided it would be better to burn their tail. So they arrested him for some burglaries and that he had taken part in while he was actually under surveillance. Clifford, again, was still on mandatory supervision from prison, and he ended up with 90 other convictions for like petty things.
Wow.
While in custody, Clifford offered them a deal $10,000 per body to be put into a trust for his wife and kid. Police, meanwhile, had taken his truck in looking for evidence, and while they did um, find an odd collection of items, including syringes, drugs, and weapons, no forensic evidence of value was found until they shifted the passenger seat. Like it sounds like they were trying to move it and it wouldn't move. So they looked under it and found a notebook wedged under it. And the notebook was that of Judy Cosmas on it. And it had like
Mm,
her name written on the
mm-hmm.
front of it in her handwriting,
Right.
too. So back in the interrogation room, they continued talking to Clifford, who would offhandedly reference information that was never ever released to public.
Mhm.
Still, they had little concrete evidence to make a conviction, but they started by arresting him on August 18th for the murder of Judy Cosma.
So was he saying he would get $10,000 per body for this trust because he could discover, like he could find the killer and then figure out where the bodies were?
So he wasn't saying anything about the killer at that point. He was like, so I want, for each body that I show you where they're at, I want $10,000 to go into a trust.
But he wasn't necessarily taking credit yet either
Mm-mm.
then. Okay.
So Corporal Fred Male was the one to eventually go into the interrogation room and make a deal. Quote, 11 bodies for $100,000, end quote, was what Clifford offered. Corporal Male stated that they needed a statement to go along with each body, along with evidence or keepsakes. Clifford said that they needed a contract, and one was drawn up between the RCMP and him. After the contract was drawn up and signed, Molly reminded Clifford that the deal had to be approved by someone further up the ladder in the chain of command, and Clifford was fine with that and called his wife, telling her that she was going to be rich. She, on the other hand, was not happy, and he expected her to just be like, "Yay, I'm going to
Oh,
have all this money." But he'd tell her more about what was going on later, aware that the phone calls were being recorded.
I was like thinking, how could you ever accept that money? Like if you found out that you were going to get $100,000 in a trust from your husband because he showed the police where these children's like bodies are,
hmm
I would burn it.
hmm I think that would, yeah. But at this time, I don't think she knew why the money.
Right.
It
She
doesn't
just
sound.
knew he's
Mhm,
like been arrested, and
mhm,
he's like, "Don't worry, I'm dealing with some shit. I might not be able to get home, but I'm gonna make you rich."
mhm. Yeah.
And she was like, that sucks."
She's like, "You're in jail.
Yeah,
Why are you in jail?
yeah,
I don't like this." Yeah,
yeah. We have a
is what it
child
sounds
to
like.
take care of.
Mhm. So the DA looked over the information, taking it all in: the bodies, the manpower to find them, the evidence gathering, and while he didn't like the blood money being paid to a vicious murderer, he weighed in getting the children back and signed off on the deal. In an office, Clifford, along with his lawyer and wife, were brought in, and cash was counted out per the deal. Then Clifford was put in a police uniform and a cap to hide his identity and taken along his kill route in an unmarked car. Everything said in the vehicle was recorded as they went, and he told everyone how he incapacitated his young victims and how he brutalized them. At each scene, he went straight to where the body was buried and reenacted his killings. At the end of the day, his wife had $100,000 and 11 children were found. Cases solved.
Wow.
But Clifford wasn't done with Molly. He called him in and said that he had 20 more under his belt and was willing to show police where the bodies were for a mere $5,000 apiece. But the DA was done. They had him dead to rights and weren't going to pay anything else to him or his family. So in jail, he was transferred to confinement as other prisoners would throw garbage and lit cigarettes at him as they passed.
Good.
Clifford, angry that he couldn't get more money, initially refused to plead guilty, and so on January 11th, 1982, his trial began. But within 3 days, Clifford decided to reverse his not guilty plea and instead pled guilty to all 11 counts of first-degree murder. Since he had conceded guilt, presiding Justice Harry McKay stated, quote, "No punishment that any civilized country could impose would be adequate for the severity of your crimes. You should never be granted parole for the remainder of your days. It would be foolhardy to let you at large," end quote. And he is sentenced to 11 concurrent life sentences for this, with no parole eligibility for 25 years.
But he could parole after 25 years?
So that was confusing, and I don't know Canadian, like, their law. But I guess there are some laws in place that they can, no matter what, after so many years, request parole, even though
Mm.
the judge said that you should never get out. Um, so I'm not really sure how that kind of
Okay, so
works.
it probably is. Sounds like since he switched his plea to guilty,
Hmm.
the judge was saying, like, ultimately, you should
Hmm.
be in prison for the rest of your
Yep.
life, but now I'm going to just give you the most I can.
Hmm.
But let it be known that whoever has to review this case in 25 years,
Hmm.
this man should be
Hmm.
still in jail
Yeah.
or in prison.
So when his crimes went public, he received the nickname
Oh, no.
the Beast of BC, which is British Columbia.
Hmm.
Still, Clifford was mad that his other deal didn't go through, so he leaked the news of the first deal to the media, and on January 14th, 1982, the media reported on the, quote, cash for bodies, end quote, deal, in which Clifford's wife received a large sum of money in exchange for Clifford pointing out where he killed and buried children. The public was, not surprisingly, outraged that the city paid a large sum of money to a murderer's family. Eventually, under all the scrutiny, his wife returned the money and then divorced Clifford. Although there's a couple sources that say that they put it in a trust fund overseas and she kept the money. So
Hmm.
just keep that in, you know.
I
I really hope she gave the money back. So that's what I'm gonna say. I hope she gave it back.
Yeah, I'll live with that. I mean, it's hard to believe that she did, honestly.
Hmm.
Like, she would have had it for a long enough time, like, even if it was just a week or two, but
Yeah.
it was longer than that. She would have had that money at that point for some time, and to say that you're gonna just give it back
Hmm.
is I have a hard time
Yeah.
believing that. It is that's a I struggle with that one. That's a tricky one for me. Like, the paying him to find these children, like, on one hand, if you were the parent and you wanted your child's body back, you'd be like, give him whatever he wants.
Hmm.
Like, I want to know where my kid is.
Hmm.
Like, I want that. Like, but then on the other hand, it's like, but now you're paying this man $10,000
For each
for
person he
each
killed.
person he killed.
Hmm. I think that's where the struggle of most people is, and I too felt the same way. Like, if that was one of my children, I very much would want their body back to have that
Yeah.
piece of them, to be able to have probably not closure, but some place to grieve where I know where they are.
Right. Right.
But on the other hand, again, and they let him relive, like, he
I know.
reenacted the reenactment part. I strongly disagree with letting him do that, because
Ugh.
that was his fix, and he was excited, and that made him so happy.
Right.
And it's so disgusting. And so I'm like, no, I don't like that part. I don't like that
I
part.
don't like it at all either. And it's so not necessary. I
Yeah,
know they were trying to get like information out of him and make sure that like,
it was an airtight
yeah,
case.
but
Yeah.
it's airtight when he drives you to every body,
Hmm.
right? Like,
Yeah,
you're
I
not
think,
going to get
I know.
any juror or judge to go, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, he's gross.
After this, he tried again and again to find his way back into the news, to be important. And then on August 19th, 1997, Clifford applied for parole under the quote unquote faint hope clause, in which the Canadian Criminal Code allows prisoners to seek early release after just 15 years of a life sentence, but the application was dismissed.
Faint Hope. Sort of a funny name.
On July 18th, 2006, Clifford attempted to see the National Parole Board after 25 years, at which he stated, quote, "Do I look like some kind of raving lunatic?" End quote. Spectators shouted in agreement, and it took the board about a half an hour to reject his application.
Good.
On November 30th, 2010, Clifford once again attempted to see the parole board, and once again he was denied. With that, he faded away into the background, as he should. Then on September of 2011, was diagnosed with cancer. He was transferred to Laval Hospital in Quebec. On September 21st, Sharon Rosenbelt, the mother of Darren Johnsrud, was notified, by the Correctional Service of Canada that Clifford was diagnosed with cancer and had days to live. True enough, Clifford died weeks after being informed of his diagnosis on September 30th at age 71. Bridget Kozma, the family of Judy Kozma, was informed of his death by the Corrections of Canada. And that is the end of Clifford Olson Jr.
I am really glad he's not alive for so many reasons, but I was sitting there thinking when you were like, and then he stayed out of media ever since then, and I was like, until he hears our podcast.
No, we are not talking nicely about this man.
No, he sucks.
Yes, he's a horrible human being.
Yeah.
But that is the end of him, and I hope it was bone cancer.
One of the bad ones.
That's the worst cancer I can think of, bone cancer, because it's
Yeah.
so painful,
Yeah.
and you can't, like, most of the time people say that you can't,
There's not like nothing you
comfort
can
them.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope it was bone cancer and rectal cancer.
A little bit of
I
everything.
hope it was all the
Yeah.
cancers.
Besides brain.
I was just gonna say, except for brain, I want you to know you're
Yeah,
going.
exactly. You and I were right there together.
Yep. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, to all those out there listening, be careful. It's a dangerous world we live in.